passed down. So that's
Yeah.
why intergenerational trauma is real. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, if intergenerational trauma is real and so prevalent, why don't we create some intergenerational healing? Why don't we create some intergenerational empowerment? Why don't we create some intergenerational confidence? Why don't we create some intergenerational awakening? So that's why I'm literally setting out to work with people who are also purpose driven, even if they're not even sure what that purpose is right now, but they're feeling called to something bigger.
Yes.
And especially women of color.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 14 of the Power of Why podcast. My name is Naomi and today I am joined by my incredible friend, Dhouha Haddad. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you for having me, Naomi. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm super pumped to talk to you. I mean, we've already had like a 20-minute conversation before hitting record because you get carried away. And
It always happens like that. We're like, we should have been recording this.
So I'm going to introduce you for a bit, and then I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your origin story, and then we'll dive right in. Does that sound good?
Awesome. Let's do it.
Okay. So Dhouha was born in Tunisia. She was raised in Canada. You know, she spent a year in Jersey some time ago, and now you live in Ottawa.
Yes.
Who knows what the future holds next for you. Dhouha is a social worker turned social entrepreneur, a mom of two beautiful little girls, and you're married to your best friend. You are passionate about empowering racialized women to fulfill key leadership roles in all domains. So Dhouha is currently phasing out an 8-year social work career and is being called to coaching full-time. She's worked with, hundreds of people over the years through various life circumstances around trauma, breakthroughs, soul growth, business growth, and not surprisingly has been a certified life coach practitioner for the past 6 years now and an entrepreneur for about 1. So using her coaching business, Dhouha helps other women unlock their confidence to become emotionally intelligent leaders so they may achieve their world impact with power and posture. Dhouha, you're an artist, you love to dance, you are determined to do stand-up in the near future, which I need to be invited to. And you know what I love most? Stay tuned. And what I love most about our friendship is how we can, just be completely honest, talk about gratitude, talk about growth, manifestation, our vision, and our dreams. And, more importantly, how we're actually, bringing that to fruition. And I constantly learned from you and your incredible energy. So
Thank you, Naomi.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that we met. It's been since August, right, that we met. So it's been...
That's crazy. That's been like less than a year.
But...
And I just feel like you've already become such a key person in my life. Like when I think about the empowered and powerful and inspiring women that surround me, I'm just like, yeah, Naomi, you're right up there. And like, thank you for always having held that space. Like from the first conversations we've had, we go deep right away. And I'm like, whoa, how did we get here? But I love it. So thank you.
I definitely, in our first interaction, felt a connection, and I'm super happy that we followed up with each other and actually kept the conversation going. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time.
It's my pleasure.
And
thank you for also liking coffee. I feel like that was a common point of contact for us.
I like coffee shops. I really love vibes of coffee shops.
Yeah.
And many conversations with you. So I'd really love for you to talk about like your origin story, and if there's anything in that bio that I missed but was really important to you, I'd love for you to talk about it, and then we can dive right in.
So I mean, you covered like the big themes in it, basically some of the key things that I feel have led me to where I am today is being a second generation immigrant, having become a mom at a young age, having had a social work career, having worked in different social situations. Like I just realized that the way I relate to the world was unique and that I had to do something with it. And so when I finally started allowing myself to believe in my ability to connect with other people deeply on a deep empathic level, that's when I started meeting and attracting people like you and other amazing people in my life right now. So I'm grateful to have this opportunity to sit down and chat with you and share all that you have to offer with everybody.
No, thank you, Duha. Um, I remember, so this is the second, for everyone listening, this is the second time that we recorded Duha's episode. The first, it was a remarkable first episode, so I still have that on record, and I'm going to keep that dear to me. But, so there has been a lot of shifts in Duha's business, and we wanted to re-record and publish like an updated version of what's been going on with her. And I think there's a lot to be learned around some of the transitions that you've made recently. And one thing that I'd really love to start on was this conversation about identity. And I know before you started making kind of these shifts, you struggled with identity and the different titles that you had. And you had one story that you shared with me, around like being a mother and what that meant, or what society perceived that word to mean, and how you didn't really resonate with that, but kind of defined motherhood in your own way. So can you talk a little bit about identity and how you've navigated that word through your life?
Yeah, for sure. So, like already when my family immigrated to Canada, I was a baby when we came from Tunisia, and already I realized that like, okay, I had a unique identity among the majority of the kids around me, because when we lived in Montreal at the time, French was already my second language. My family uh, had different religious views. My family had a different language. My family had different practices, different traditions, different beliefs from everybody else that I was surrounded around. So already at a young age, I started developing a sense of identity of like, okay, I'm kind of different from whoever's around me.
Yeah.
But I would say it wasn't until like late into my 20s that I finally started developing a sense of identity that wasn't dichotomous, basically, that wasn't based on what I am not according to the people around me. So to explain that, like for example, before I was always like, oh, I guess I'm a visible minority because I don't match the majority. I guess I am a religious minority because I don't practice what the majority does. I guess I am a woman of color because the majority of women here are white. I guess I am, a young mom because the majority of moms are into their 30s in North America. And so I realized that that was such a limiting way of identifying myself, just placing labels on me based on like using the bar of measure of what other people around me looked like, sounded like, lived like.
Yeah.
And so finally I started just relating to myself through, okay, what is inside of me? What are the things that make me unique in terms of my soul's purpose, in terms of my way of relating to the world, and not of the world relating to me? And I would say that was like the biggest shift in my way of approaching my own identity.
And how did you find, like, when you started making those shifts, was it immediate that you started attracting these people who are kind of like on the same wavelength, or did it take some time where people were like, what are you talking about, Dhouha? Like, I don't feel like I connect with you anymore. Because I definitely went through that phase too. So I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, it definitely took time. Like there was this awkward space in between my, you could say, old way of relating to the world from the outside in, to like this current way that I relate to the world more from the inside out. And so there was this huge gap in between it that was like filled with, I would say, confusion, loneliness, questioning, and just an overall feeling of feeling kind of lost. And so this is just like to remind everybody that like it's okay to feel like that at times, because that's when you know that like you're on that bridge to the next level.
Right.
And so I would say that like once I started looking more outwardly, looking more inwardly, just trying to figure out like what feels misaligned. Like I've got this great career, I've got a great husband, I've got beautiful kids, like we have a very privileged life. Like why do I feel disconnected? Like why don't I feel rooted into my existence, into the world? And so I started then disconnecting first before I started building healthy connections. So I started kind of weaning myself off of those friendships that felt really superficial and that I
Yeah.
felt like it was daunting, like it felt like a chore to keep up small talk and conversations. So I started, just weeding myself off of those friendships. I started being more selective about the people I spend time with, even family members,
Mm-hmm.
based on what brought out the best in me, and just developing a lot more self-awareness around what environments brought out what within me. So that was kind of my first step. And then just starting to wean myself off the ones that were not so healthy. And that's when you realize that, like, oh, look, most of my social circle, most of the people at work, most of the things I associate with are pretty negative, or like just are not serving me. Not to
Yeah.
judge what they are, but
Yeah.
just realizing that these things are not serving me. These things are not supporting my highest self. They're not supporting me showing up as my best self. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I would say it started more with like cutting ties, just trimming everything before I started rebuilding. And
Rebuilding.
there was at least like, I'd say a year and a half before I started establishing these meaningful connections.
Mm-hmm. And so before you started trimming or disconnecting from those energy sources, what you said, were you feeling frustrated? Were you feeling kind of like, I'm trying to understand what that internal feeling was.
Mm. Honestly,
Comfort?
I was depressed, like
Okay.
full out, like full disclosure. I was depressed and I was anxious. Like I was suffering
Anxious.
from both.
Yeah.
And it literally got to a point where uh just my health was struggling, my energy levels were zapped, I had no inspiration. Things that were supposed to be very regular in life just felt
Yeah.
daunting.
Mm.
And so every time I visited the family
Like leaving
doctor,
the
he just
house,
like,
for
yeah, like
example.
trying to leave the house,
Yeah.
getting myself to go to work.
Yeah.
If my kids like woke up in the middle of the night, I literally felt like crying. Like I felt so
Um,
frustrated. I felt like a victim of my circumstance. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that this is not the way it's supposed to feel. Like I shouldn't
mm-hmm.
feel like I'm a victim of my motherhood, or I'm a victim of my job, or a victim of my relationship.
Right.
So the common denominator in all of these is me. And that was kind of a depressing realization in the beginning, because I didn't realize the power that I had in that.
Interesting.
So yeah, I just initially took a few months off of work as prescribed by my doctor. And then it was literally just when I put work on pause, when I put social interactions on pause, and I literally just started spending time with myself. And at first that was scary. It was
Mm-hmm.
super scary. I was like, what the hell do I do with myself? What do I do with my time? What do I do with my words? What do I like? Who am I if I'm not around other people?
Right.
And so that's when I finally started listening to myself. That's when I finally created space for myself to and literally my focus for those few months was just to remember what were the things that make me happy, what are the things that make me feel really alive, what are the things that make me inspired, what are the things that make me happy to be here and that make me excited for the rest of my life.
And fulfilled, right?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
And so, would you write these things down, Duha? Because I'm curious. I was listening to an interview with Tim Ferriss. I love Tim Ferriss,
Mm-hmm.
and one of
Yes.
his guests, Jim Collins, would have this book that he would call a bug book, and he would
Mm-hmm.
document his days, and he would score his days essentially, and he would outline, like if it was a negative day, for example, or he didn't feel that great, he would
Mm-hmm.
outline some of the things that happened that may have made him feel that way.
Yeah.
And when his days went well, like he would just do this every day, right? And over time
Mm-hmm.
he started to notice patterns around what were the things that had to happen in all my days where I felt great or I felt fulfilled. And he would start to kind of like
Yeah.
re-engineer that into intentionally
Mm.
put those into his days, right? But that takes a
Yeah.
lot of self-awareness and being able to recognize and kind of like
Mm-hmm.
pinpoint you and what you need, right?
Yeah.
So would you write these things down, or would you just take time to be with yourself, or both?
Yeah. I would do both. I wasn't nearly as organized as he was in his execution of it. Like it was not like a daily habit at the time, because I think had I had instilled those daily habits, disciplines, and routines for my own self, I probably would have been in a better place. But it was pretty sporadic at the time. And usually I didn't sit down and journal until I was like, if until I was in a place that felt pretty close to rock bottom, like
Okay.
where I just felt like I couldn't pull inspiration from anywhere. So I'm like, okay, let me just try to put this on paper and see if something comes out of it.
Interesting.
And um, so I did have like an intentional moment of clarity, I would say the day that I left my job. So the day that I left my job in the child protection, I just went down to a I went to a coffee shop, sat there by myself. Like I was so tempted to just text a friend and be like, "Hey, who wants to come for coffee with me?" And I'm like, just stop for a moment and be
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
I just went in there with my journal and I wrote down three questions to myself. What does my mind need? What does my heart need? And what does my body need? Because I had enough self-awareness to know that I was neglecting those three things,
Yeah.
which is why I was not feeling fulfilled, which is why I felt depleted. And so from there, I started gaining some clarity around like, okay, clearly my mind needs a lot more stimulation. Clearly my mind loves connecting intellectually with other people, with knowledge, with books, with articles, with everything. And I wasn't giving myself the opportunity to do that. My heart needed a lot more deep, soulful connection and a lot more passionate connections, which I wasn't allowing myself to have in my social work career because it wasn't the space for that. It wasn't appropriate to develop those types of relationships in
Right.
that sphere.
Yeah.
And what my body needed, like I knew that I was not being healthy. I was not working out whatsoever. I was not intentional about what I ate. I was always on the go and like my body came last.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty obvious why I felt the way I felt. Um, but then from there, just placing that foundation of like, okay, this is where I am right now, and that's okay. But let's start laying the bricks one by one to a better place. And yeah, it was an uphill climb from there, but it was good.
How do you know how many, like, how long was it since that date where you sat down with yourself and answered those three questions?
Those three questions I wrote down, I'd say like a year and a half ago.
Oh, wow. So it's pretty recent.
Yeah, when you put it on paper and you name it chronologically, like 1.5 years ago, it sounds super recent, but it literally
Yeah,
feels like
but
a
it feels
lifetime
like a
ago.
lifetime. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like every month that goes by feels like a whole other breakthrough in my personal life and my soul at the moment. So time is almost not a fair measure of things for me right now.
Mm-hmm. And I think based off of our conversations, because I've been feeling the same way too. I look
Mm,
back in my calendar just to make sure that I haven't that I followed up with the right people, because we've been traveling a bit the past few months. And
hmm.
I was like, wait, that just happened 2 weeks ago? I felt like we've been back.
Exactly.
Like, I felt like that was 2 or 3 months ago. And I
Yeah.
think, honestly, I think it's because you've been caring for yourself and you've been doing the work that's really fulfilling and the stuff that you need.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just saying, like right now we're in June. At the end of May, I was like, what? We are still the month of May? Like the whole first month of May, I was not even in first week of May, sorry. I was not even in the country. So
Yeah.
literally my May at home was just 3 weeks. And it
Mhm.
was the most intense month of the year. It like so much happened. It felt like everything in the past 8 9 months has been leading up to the month of May. Like such big decisions were made, big moves were made, big realizations took place, major breakthroughs happened,
Breakthroughs.
and I'm like, this has just been 1 month. This is crazy.
And you know what? Sometimes like all these things happen in a moment. And it's
Mm,
crazy. Yeah, there will be a lot of things that kind of lead up, and your path will be kind of lined up in a certain way. But it's a moment when you make a decision, right? It's a moment when
exactly.
a breakthrough happens. It might have been years leading up to it, but
It's
these
exactly
shifts
it.
happen pretty quickly. And so
Hmm.
Do you want to share a little bit about that? Like what has happened in the month of May, what moves you're talking about, and maybe how your perspective has maybe evolved?
Yeah. So, in I'd say the major decision that we came to as a family in the month of May, was that we are finally ready to relocate. Like we are
Mm-hmm.
finally ready to move out of our home city. I've lived
Yeah.
here for the past 20 years. My husband was born and raised here,
Yeah.
and we are ready to just change environments. Like we are ready to just go somewhere that we feel more connected to the environment, we feel more connected to the people. We are ready to just completely have a fresh perspective and to find a place that nourishes our souls a lot more,
Yeah.
and to build more meaningful connections, to have a to enlarge our business network,
Yeah.
and to just experience life
Yeah.
elsewhere, like just to get outside of our comfort zone, to get outside the box, like not expecting it to be all rosy and perfect, but sometimes you just need a different set of challenges in life.
Yeah, and I I totally agree with you. And I think it takes, you know, I was skimming through because we've had a lot of conversations, and something that is fascinating that always comes up that I've been fascinated also recently talking about is like living a fear-based life. And I know you're
Mm,
incredibly passionate about this. This is like um this is what you help people through. Um
mm-hmm,
and I know before you started on this new journey, you struggled with this. So, can you talk a little bit about what a fear based life is and
mm,
like how did you end up breaking through?
yeah. Um, oof, okay. So
That's a lot. I know it's a lot.
yeah, it's all good.
But it
So,
leads up to this. I think it leads up nicely to you and your family's decision to relocating, right? Because
mm-hmm,
Tim Ferriss has this fantastic exercise where he said instead of goal setting, we should be fear setting. And this is like taking an outline of what
mm,
scares you the fucking most, writing it down, breaking
mm,
it up, and you actually notice when you break it up to its most like minute small pieces, it's actually not that fucking scary. Like
yeah,
we tend to friggin' like we make these things bigger than they need to be, and we so quickly talk
exactly.
ourselves out of doing the thing that actually may be the best for us, you know. And so
Mm-hmm,
I really want you to talk about what a fear-based life is and how you were able to work with that.
yeah. So I'd say for a long time I did. That's what triggered a lot of my anxiety for a long time. Like I'd
Yeah.
say I suffered from my anxiety up until 2 years ago, up until a little under 2 years ago. And so because I was always thinking about what I did not want to happen,
Yeah.
and we hear it time and again, where your focus goes, your energy flows. So those things were literally zapping my energy, sucking the life out of my life, sucking the
Mhm.
energy, the life source out of me. And so, for example, like even when, like as soon as, and I think, for example, a lot of moms can relate to this, as soon as my kids were born, I was overwhelmed with fear, especially with my first. I was just like, oh my god, she's gonna grow. What if she grows
Yeah.
and she doesn't like me? What if she grows and she what if she grows and just becomes this like nasty person? What if like she just or just anything, like what if she's sleeping and she stops breathing? Like
Mhm.
what if she gets super sick and I don't realize it? Or just catastrophizing situations that have not even happened yet.
Right.
And
Right.
I started realizing, I'm like, okay, what am I freaking out over right now? What thoughts are causing me to feel this way? And a lot of what started breaking that ice for me, honestly, was just learning, just exposing myself to new things. So I started reading more about some functional psychology. I started reading up more about human behavior. I started reading up more about what our thought patterns say about us, or how they lead us up to where we are in life. And when I learned that our emotions are a product of our thoughts and not the
Yeah.
other way around,
Yeah.
I was like, oh man. I was like, I've had it all wrong. I was like, okay, so if I'm feeling shitty half the time,
Yeah.
it's nobody's fault and it's no situation's fault. Like, I have to take ownership of that crap, and I have to realize that I've been catastrophizing, overthinking, uh, projecting fear onto all of these situations, and that's what made me feel anxious. That's what made me feel overwhelmed. That's what made me feel sad. That's what made me feel nauseated at just basic life situations sometimes. And so I started to work a lot more around reframing my thoughts,
Yeah.
bringing more awareness to my thoughts. And before, I just felt like my head was this safe little place where I could just let anything happen there and judge anything, including myself, as if there were
Mm-hmm.
no repercussions as long as I didn't externalize them. But the
Right.
reality is that stuff does become externalized through your vibration, through your frequency, through your aura, your energy, whatever you want to call it, through your vibe, through the
Yeah.
look in your eyes,
Yeah.
through the things you say, through those subtle looks that we do catch from other people. And so I realized that I probably wasn't a really pleasant person to be around, um, because just listening to my own self in conversations, I realized that I always jumped to the negative, and I always liked complaining. And it was so much easier to complain about things than to
I
find the good
know.
in it.
Yeah.
And I just realized, I'm like, okay, I am making no effort to amplify the good in my life. It's almost like it's just easier to be miserable because it's easier to relate to people that way, because a lot of people do live in that place of misery. So let's just commiserate together. And I
Wait,
found
Dhouha,
that.
before you continue, I'm curious. Did
Mhm.
you snap yourself out of it, or did someone call you out on it?
No, it was definitely by myself.
Okay.
It was
So
definitely
it
by
was through
myself.
your
And
learnings,
this
the
this
books you were reading and stuff.
huge, yeah, this huge, I'd say, breakthrough initially happened. Like, the thing that shattered the thickest layer of ice for me was the first time I traveled without my husband or my kids.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, I went to a like wellness culture festival in Jamaica called Tomorrow Today, and I was literally just sitting there in front of the ocean by myself and wondering, like, who the heck am I? What am I doing here?
Yeah.
There's no husband to take care of or talk to or relate to around me right now. There are no kids to take care of to like validate my existence. There are no parents, the ones that brought me up as best as they could, projecting their own ideals onto me. There is nobody around me right now. So who am I? What does that mean? What this little speck of 3D existence that I am in the universe right now, what do I represent?
Mm-hmm.
And so I obviously did not come up with an answer on the spot. And obviously my answer is still very much under construction and always will be.
Yeah.
But just coming to that realization, just being there, being stripped of all labels that I had basically rooted my identity in,
Yeah.
was a huge breakthrough moment for me, to just start letting go of what I thought was right, what I thought was bad, what I thought was supposed to be, and to just start listening more to my soul, start listening more to my heart, start trusting my intuition a lot more, and stop just absorbing and slurping up other people's projections or other people's fears or what society tells you is good or bad, such as having walked away from a permanent position and the highest paying position that I could have gotten for my education at the time,
Yeah.
with with a locked in pension for the next 45 years and everything, and just walking away from that, and people being like,
What are you
what
doing? Are you a
are you
bad
doing?
woman? Yeah, all of that.
Some of us worked for 10 years to get to that position, and thankfully, like, I worked hard for it, but I got it pretty easy.
Mm.
And so thankfully I wasn't attached to it, because I realized it didn't bring me joy. And I looked at the people who were 20 years ahead of me
Yeah.
in that career, for example, or people who were 40 years ahead of me, or people who were about to cash out their pension and go retire. And their their
You didn't
life
want
was
to
not
be there.
appealing to me. Nope,
Yeah.
that's not where I wanted to be in 45
Yeah.
years. I'm like,
Yeah.
I already feel like I've almost reached that point in terms of my career experience. So I'm was really ready to move on.
Mm-hmm. And I'm happy that you had the courage to do so, because I'm sure it wasn't easy. There are a lot of people
Definitely
that
was
you
not.
kind of, even like looking around anywhere, it doesn't matter if you're at work, or I love to people watch in cafes or at the mall. And sometimes I notice like people just in a complete daze, like not even here. Like if you were to like touch someone, for example, it's like they'll be like shocked out of whatever thoughts they were having.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and that's really heartbreaking, right? Like from that, I think the one thing that I think about is people not realizing their potential.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah, that's
something
exactly it.
else. And
Yeah.
yeah, did you have something to say about that?
Yeah, about not realizing their potential. Like I had come to a point where I realized like, okay, what is it about me that's making me miserable, especially at work right now? I was like, why are these people doing it? They've been doing it for 20 years. Is there something wrong with me that I'm feeling burnt out, that I'm feeling exhausted, that I don't want to do this anymore? And so I started looking at like how they operate at work. And
Yeah,
like a lot of them had become numb to like the trauma that we see
complacent.
every day.
Yeah,
They just like they were just okay with like seeing these families in horrible situations. They just got really good at being blamed for other people's problems. They just got really good at coping with it, but to a point where I felt like they didn't even relate to other or connect to other people's pain whatsoever.
yeah,
And so that seemed like another extreme for me. I was overly empathic. Like I was not only empathetic, I was empathic. Like I delved into people's energy fields and just like started drowning with them emotionally. I would
wow.
come home and I felt like I had like the weight of the world on my shoulders after some of the families that I was with. Like I couldn't sleep sometimes thinking of like the kids that I had worked with, the pain I had seen in some
Mm-hmm.
families earlier that day. And so I'm like, okay, something's got to change. Either the way I relate to people has to change, or the career that I'm in has to change, because the two are not working together right now. And then I'm glad I made the choice of realizing, like, okay, the way that I relate to people, my deep empathy, my ability to literally feel someone else's emotions and energy in their presence is one of my biggest gifts. So that's not
Mm-hmm.
something I'm willing to sacrifice for a job.
Yeah.
And so that was literally the deciding factor of,
Mm-hmm.
do I stay or do I go?
Mm-hmm. And so I want to talk about your life now and
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that you've been working on. And okay, let's start there. But I'd really love for you to talk about what like leading a purpose-driven life looks like for you, not looks like in general, but looks like for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there have been like a lot of different drops leading to what I call my purpose right now. Um, and for the longest time, I like shied away from saying it out loud. But
Mm-hmm.
literally,
Why?
I feel like um, because
Was it
people don't
scary?
talk like this. Because the general public doesn't talk
The
like this. Like
general
people
public.
don't go to work. People don't go to work and say like, "Hey, what's your purpose in life? What's
Yeah. Okay.
your
Fine.
vision? Like,
Yeah.
what are you dedicated to? What legacy are you dedicated to leaving behind?" Like people just go to work and like, "Hey, working hard, hardly working hard, hard." Like So
I know.
I
I know, Dhouha.
I
Yeah.
was not in an environment where conversations like that were nourished, accepted, fostered, or even embraced or allowed. So it took me a while to finally just allow myself to say, like, yes, I am fully committed to altering the DNA of the next generation. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what? How are you going to do that, crazy lady? Well, basically, like when I was in my social work career, which like I don't at all resent my social work career. I don't at all judge my past decisions. Like I'm so thankful for everything that has brought me to this point, even the extremely painful stages, because I've
Because it
learned
led you
so
to this
much at
point.
every point.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so one of the things that I had the opportunity to learn about when I was in the social work field, especially learning about intergenerational trauma, was about the study of epigenetics. So basically, this like just go Google it. It's fascinating. There is so much research about how our current life circumstances, our social environment, our decisions, our psychology, the way we lead our lives socially right now, literally come and leave an imprint on our DNA.
Yep.
And so
And it's
that is
passed
going
down.
exactly, and it's
Yeah.
passed down. So that's
Yeah.
why intergenerational trauma is real. And
Yeah.
that's, so I'm like, if intergenerational trauma is real and so prevalent, why don't we create some intergenerational healing? Why don't we create some intergenerational empowerment? Why don't we create some intergenerational confidence? Why don't we create some intergenerational awakening? So that's why I'm literally setting out to work with people who are also purpose driven, even if they're not even sure what that purpose is right now, but they're feeling called to something bigger.
Yes.
And especially women of color who I believe are, and not just I believe, I know are very underrepresented in key leadership roles around the world.
Yeah.
So I literally want to work with these women to help them master their own social, psychological, emotional, and mental identities so that they can show up the most powerfully, the most confidently in every sphere of their life and create those waves in the world.
I love that. I love that.
And so, yeah, what was the question again?
I mean, you answered. I asked about the work that you're doing now and what a purpose-driven life looks like for Dhouha.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
so the way that translates into plain English right now is that basically I'm a coach. So
Yeah.
basically right now I coach women for the time being one-on-one on their own personal development, now especially rooted in emotional intelligence, because your EQ, your emotional quotient, is so much more important than your IQ. And so many women work so hard to boost up their IQ. I
Yeah.
like basically in the form of their credentials, their education, the amount of letters that come after their last name, the length of their resume, the years of experience. So many of us are working on like this concrete, tangible, these hard skills where our greatest strengths naturally as women for due to like literally the functioning of our brain is our emotional intelligence, and that is literally what is more important in the world, because we all know that you won't remember what somebody said, but you'll remember how they made you feel. And
Mhm.
so I'm not saying that like, hey girls, ditch the IQ. No, no, no. I know we're all already overcompensating in that field, but I'm saying let's work with the strengths that we have, because reality is we need to work our strengths more than we work our weaknesses. So
Yeah.
many of us are so good at
Very
talking
much.
about like what I'm not great at and what I need to work on, but it's like, no, no, no. What are you amazing at? And let's
Take
10x
it
that, let's
further.
100x that, and
Yeah.
take it, like blow it out of the water so that everybody's going to know you for the amazing things that you are, and that won't be ignored.
Mhm. And you know, I think there's so much intentionality around this, and I honestly believe that like all of our ideas are planted in us for a reason, especially when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I find myself not even being able to go to sleep because these things are like constantly going in my head, and it's exciting from one aspect, but it also like requires a lot of how do I say, a lot of self-care too, right? And
Yeah.
actually taking that time to, and I'm not talking about like these bubble baths and all this stuff that people like to attribute to self-care, but actually like taking time to figure out what I need. So kind of that exercise that you did around your mind, body, and heart, and
Mm-hmm.
what what your mind needed, what your body needed, what your heart needed, and
Mm-hmm.
being really intentional about how you take care of yourself, just like the way you take care of other people, right? And
Yeah.
um, especially people that you love.
Yeah.
And so,
And
yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, like what totally catalyzed my personal growth, my own self-care, my own relationship to myself and to the world and to business and everything was having a coach. And like, I know we were talking about this before we got on the call. Like, I was
Yes.
literally watching the basketball game last night and seeing
Yeah.
these star NBA players. Like, they could easily be like, we're already the best in the game. We don't need somebody to tell us how to play. But the reality is, like, a coach is the one that can objectively look at your strengths from the outside and help you project a vision and help you strategize, like, okay, how can you be smart about all the strengths that you have to have the biggest impact? And so that's literally what my coaches were able to help me do. And that's literally what I come do with my clients as well, because we can have amazing strengths, but then sometimes our strengths can almost come work against us if we're
Mm.
not using them in a smart way, if we're not using them strategically.
Mm-hmm. If you're not channeling your power into a strategic way, I believe that. Yeah. Well, when it comes to like leading a purpose-driven life, and it's not even about being fearless, like, and maybe we can go back and forth because I don't know what your thoughts are on this. I don't think that we can kind of just like lead lives without any fear, but being able to identify what they are and kind of like work with yourself to try to minimize them or plan for them, or sometimes even like not friggin' overthinking it, right? But I'd really love to talk about risk taking and kind of like when you look at your past, what are some risks that you found have really worked out for you, and maybe some that didn't work out too great, and what you learned from both?
A major risk that I took a couple of years ago was leaving
Your job.
my comfortable, in terms of like financially comfortable, and long-term, in terms of my long-term retirement plan, and comfortable. But so currently, as I mentioned, we decided to relocate, and we were thinking about like, okay, what places have we visited that literally lit a fire in our soul in the best of ways, like just lit up our passion, just made us feel more alive than ever. And for us, that was in Miami. So when my husband and I visited Miami a few months ago, we were just talking, oh, how
Wait, was
beautiful is
that the
this?
first
How
time that you visited? Is this
that was
year?
literally, yeah, I've only been to
No
Miami.
way. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before that, I had actually never visited Florida. And
Hmm.
so we fell in love, like just the energy there. We just felt so in sync with it. We felt like we could relate so much to the people there. And people are just like, they're just honest there. Like, people don't like you, they're
Yeah.
not going to waste their time on you. And I'm that type of person. I'm like, if you don't like me, you don't need to be polite. Like, just
Yeah.
cool. Okay, bye. I will not waste my time on you.
I'm
Don't be fake. Like, just be
Yes.
real,
Yes.
And
And
so,
maybe that's something that a lot of people other than Canadians know that about Canadians. Because when I went elsewhere, like even to Atlanta, for example, I was like, people think Canadians are nice, like, but this is a different type. Like, people speak from their
that's
heart.
exactly
Here,
it.
no one
Yes.
even looks at each other, Dhouha. I'm just talking about Ottawa
That's it.
specifically. But yeah, continue, please.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate to what you're saying. People are like, "Oh, Canadians are so nice." I'm like, Canadians are just really good at being polite, and there's a difference between like being an amazing person. I'm not saying at all that Canadians are not great people, but I think that like this whole notion of like even raising our kids to like not disturb the peace, be
Yeah.
super polite,
Yeah.
never speak out of line,
Tiptoe. Yeah.
never question the status quo, always be the good one, always be the peacemaker, never rock the boat. That doesn't come and serve our children when it comes to them exploring their own abilities, and that doesn't come serve us as adults. And especially for women, like especially young girls are overly rewarded for their good behavior, whereas young boys are overly forgiven for their mischievous behavior. So that really comes, and there are literally studies to prove this, why women take less risks when it comes to their careers, when it comes to their finances, when it comes to their relationships. And that's why we still end up underrepresented in most political spheres, in the corporate world, in the business world.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so just relating to taking risk, when we are raised to just be so polite and to never rock the boat, um, it makes us fear risk. It makes us feel like the risk in itself is a problem,
Yeah.
when really every day that we wake up and leave our house is a risk.
Yeah.
Like, I heard this interesting stat once, which is like the probability of something going wrong that would like lead to a death in an airport is higher than in the airplane. Yet how many people are afraid of flying? Like
Right.
how many of us is like our heart beating out of our chest and we're so scared when we're flying, when like there are so many safety measures when it comes to airplanes, that it is less likely that that something dangerous will happen to you in a plane than crossing the street or driving in a car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just been so empowering to just demystify our fears and just demystify what risk taking means.
Mm-hmm.
And just like, okay, what is the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Acknowledging it, but not living in that space for more than like 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Like just acknowledging it for the sake of demystifying it,
Yeah,
for the
like that
sake
can
of not
happen.
giving it more power than it deserves.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for example, when we decided like, okay, you know what? We're going to make this happen. We're going to move out of our home city. We're going to explore something completely different.
Right.
Of course, the list of things that can go wrong is so long, but we are not looking to live on that list. We
Mm.
prefer, like we chose instead to live in the list
Of
of the
everything
best
that could go
case
right.
scenarios.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
best case scenario, I'm going to build the most amazing connections ever there, and my business is going to explode in the next 6 months. Best case scenario, we are going to find the most beautiful apartment by the water with the best schools for our kids, the most amazing amenities, and we are going to have the most amazing lifestyle as a family. Best case scenario, we make so much money that we can fly any family member in when we miss them, even if it's for the weekend, for the week, for the month. Like
Right.
we can just, best case scenario, we are making mad USD currency that we can just spoil our parents in
Yeah.
Canada. Like, why
Yeah.
don't we live why don't we live in the realm of best case scenarios? Like when you talk about best case scenarios, people just look at you like you're crazy, like you're just
Mm-hmm.
dreaming. Well, you know what? We're also crazy and dreaming and being delusional about the worst case scenarios because they
Right.
haven't happened yet. So why do they deserve any more attention than the best case scenarios?
That's a good fucking question, Dhouha. And that's the premise of fear setting, right? The first aspect
Mm,
is to look at the worst case scenario. Just write
mhm,
down 15 to 20 things that could happen, but also
mhm,
15 to 20 things of what you can do to prevent that from happening. But then,
mhm.
like on the second page, you kind of look at, if I even try this and I reach even like partial success, what are the benefits that I could reap? And you
Mhm.
find like oftentimes, well, in most cases, you actually lose more by not doing anything, by sticking to the status quo, and the cost
Yeah.
of inaction is actually so much fucking higher than the cost
Mm.
of actually doing something about it and maybe failing, but more likely than not actually doing something really fucking great. And
Mhm.
I think the unknown is what scares people, right? But
It's exactly it.
if
The
you can
unknown.
find, yeah, if you can find excitement in that, damn, like the
Mhm.
world is your oyster. The world is
Mm.
your oyster if you can find excitement and actually see that for yourself, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I hear you. And I think a lot of people are afraid of dreaming or afraid of like casting this best case scenario type of thinking because that takes a lot of betting on yourself
Yeah.
because your only and biggest and best resource when you're jumping in with both feet
Is you?
is your own self.
Yeah.
So we are literally like moving countries, completely moving environments on the premise of we are going to make this work, you
Mm-hmm.
know and that's scary for a lot of people. And I know at most stages of my life, or probably all stages of my life up until a while ago, I
Yeah.
would not have gone into this decision because I wouldn't have had enough belief in myself.
Sure.
And so it's a lot easier for a lot of people, and most of us as humans, to just lean on external comforts.
Yeah.
Like, okay, external comforts such as i've I grew up in the city, so I'm familiar with it. My
Yeah.
family lives in the city, so I'm surrounded and supported.
I have
I
my
know the
routine.
language, I know the
Yeah.
culture, I know the city, I know the way of functioning, I know my way around. If I lose my job, at least I have connections here. Like, it's but that's all external. Those are all external factors, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just done putting my eggs in other people's baskets.
Oh, I love
And
that.
it's just
Oh, I love that visual. Okay.
it's just like I'm just ready to fully bet on myself. Like my first coach that I hired,
Yeah.
I he told me his price. Yeah, okay, I'm just gonna talk about it. Why are we scared to talk about numbers? My first coach, his price tag was I think like $5,500 or $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I knew so badly that like I needed exactly what he could help me access, which is just like getting super intentional about my own personal habits so that I can develop the right discipline to build my business, because I had been like scrambling around by myself for months and months and months with zero results and nothing to show for it other than exhaustion and like self-resentment. So I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm going to do this. Like, and it
How
was
long did it take for you to
scary.
decide and actually go for that? From the moment you found
Um,
out he existed to when you joined him?
24 hours.
Really?
Yeah. Literally, like he also did have a whole like if you decide within the next 24 hours this is my price goes up after that. And I knew that that's like, that's a whole creating urgency, it's more
Yeah.
effective for selling. Like obviously I could see that, but I also held myself accountable to that. I was like, if I can't even decide to spend on myself and invest in myself. This is not spending. I'm not going to buy a $5,000 car that's going to start depreciating the next day. I am investing in myself. I am asking myself to show up. I am asking myself, like, you better level the hell up, woman, because you just spent $6,000 on this coach. You better damn well be worth it. It was a really scary place to be that, like, oh, okay, I just took out that money in loans. I did not have that cash sitting in the bank. It was money that we were actually supposed to use for renovations for our house. And thankfully, like my husband was on board too. He was just like, you know what? Like, let's just do it. Like, you're worth it. And that was even
Mm.
scarier. The fact that he believed in me. I was like, oh shit, now you're expecting me to succeed too? Okay, I better make this work.
Oh, Dhouha. I appreciate how like completely honest you're being right now for this interview. Because I
It's
think
my pleasure.
that's like where all of the kind of value is derived, instead of like,
Mm,
no, this is kind of what I was feeling, but not like actually
mm,
going there with me. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for seeing that and acknowledging that, because it's literally one of my driving forces,
Hmm.
that like I'm just I don't just want to be another inspirational woo woo person and just like pump out a
Ooh.
bunch of inspiring quotes. Oh, sorry, I used that word woo woo, I don't just want to be like wishy-washy inspiring, make people feel great in the moment, but they're like, but now what? Now
Hmm.
I feel lost. Now I know I don't believe in myself. I feel so freaking opposite of confident right now. Like, how the hell am I supposed to achieve that? That person had this privilege, that person had this. Well, you know what? We could all sit around and cry about what we don't have. Like, did I have money to hire a coach? Nope. Did I have like past business success to be like, you know what? I've done this before. I can do this now. Nope. I was completely jumping into unforged territory. Like, it is scary and it is hard and it is challenging, but you just have to find the challenges that are worth it.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's literally the only difference between being challenged and feeling like crap at the end of the day, and then being challenged and feeling inspired and energized at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. I want to share this, and then I want to ask you a question, then we'll dive into the
Mm-hmm.
final questions. Um, okay, so there's this. So I've been doing a lot of research on like key people. So like now when I go to conferences or events, and I know speakers that are going to be there, I will do my research on what they're working on, the value that they've actually provided in my life, and like being able to communicate that to them if I ever meet them or when I meet them. And that has
Mm-hmm.
worked wonders, because I've noticed that all of these people, so for example, this retreat in Atlanta, 2,500 people of color. Let me tell you something about being like, I walked into spaces where I was like, I'm not the only one. Like, it was just rooms
Mm.
full of like black people, brown people, all doing their fucking thing. and to be surrounded
Mm,
by all of that was so inspiring. But what I noticed on these
amazing.
panels amongst these speakers is that Dhouha, they all knew each other. And I was like, wait.
Mm,
And they were talking about like when they were grinding and when they were hustling and when they were getting work done, in the early stages. And I was like, wait, you guys didn't all meet each other once you made it? Like once you were at the top of your game? No, they knew each other for years, and some of them even like over 10 years. And I'm like, that's really fascinating because if you kind of look at it in a pyramid fashion, you have your group of friends or your peers,
mhm,
as you would call it, and
mhm,
you guys are all working on whatever you're working on, but are trying to realize this vision that you've set yourself for the next few decades. And
mm,
as that goes along, as time goes along, people start to dwindle. Maybe they don't believe in themselves, or maybe their thing is not working. But the very few people who actually make it long term, they all started together. They all were at the
amazing.
beginning stages and kind of were working with each other, were collaborating. And I thought that was so beautiful. They didn't meet while they were at the top, they worked together, and they were the few that actually um, prospered. And I think one of the major keys to actually getting to that space, and kind of like walking in your own truth is working towards the right thing. Like if you don't believe in you or what your vision is, or if you don't see it, you're gonna quit. You're gonna quit
Mm,
because the pain and all this suffering and all these late nights are not gonna be worth it, right? So when you say
mm,
like you're 100% committed to your mission, I believe it because I see you in action every day,
mm.
So
Thank you so much.
keep
I
walking in your
appreciate
truth,
that.
man. Keep
I
walking in your
appreciate that. Thank
truth.
you, Naomi. Oh, I'm sending you a big virtual hug right now.
I feel it, and I'm sending you one back.
Thanks.
um, does your why scare you? Does your vision
Mm,
scare you?
um, sometimes, sometimes, yeah. Uh, like there are some days where I'm just like so exhausted that I am like, what if I just went back to being a normal person? Like, would the world be okay?
Normal
And
person.
you know what? Like, reality is the world would be okay if I went back to being just whatever, just the way I started out leading my life and just stayed in my little bubble. Like, I don't know if you read the book by Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yes.
Uh, and so that book just like helped make my mission just so real that it's like, this is my mission because I have chosen for this to be my mission.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, I believe that every single one of us has a calling, but I have chosen to embrace that calling and make it my own. I could have very well just chosen to be like, yeah, it sounds like a really nice idea. Maybe one day I'll start a blog or something, or, whatever. I'm just going to keep doing what I do.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, as much as I believe that I am here to alter the DNA of the next generation, I know that if I don't do it, the next generation will continue to exist anyway, you
Right.
know? And so sometimes it helps to just be super real with myself that it's like, okay, you don't want to get up and change the world, then don't. Like,
Mm-hmm.
would you feel better about that? Would you sleep
Mm-hmm.
better? Like, sometimes I literally have to, like, just give myself that tough love and just be like, would you, like, you know what, your energy is zapped today, you're probably just hangry, the kids probably haven't let you sleep for the past 3-4 nights, get a good night's sleep and just pick up again tomorrow. So it's that balance of like tough love of like, yeah, okay, like, be all whiny about it now as if you're going to feel any better if you give up on your why, and like, okay, that's enough for today, just go get a good night's sleep and let's reconvene tomorrow. And then it's just a dance. You got to dance with yourself sometimes between being super real and giving yourself a kick in the butt, and then just giving yourself space to sometimes to just not totally throw in the towel, but just rest and
Yeah.
recollect your
Rest.
energy.
Yep. I like that word. Rest. Yep. Because sometimes, like, Sam always says this. She's like, it's not going to work if you're not working. And that's quite, she says it with,
Exactly.
she says it with a laugh, but I know it comes from a place where she's seen me go through stuff, and it'll be
Mm,
that like lighthearted thing, but like, are you hearing me? I care for you. Um,
100%.
So
No, she's
that's, yeah,
amazing.
I
I
love
love Sam.
Sam.
Sam,
um,
we love you. She
Sam.
doesn't listen.
Well, you know what? I'll know if she doesn't. If she doesn't hear this mini shout out.
Yeah, Sam, if you're not DMing me saying I love you too, I know you didn't listen to our
I'm
podcast.
crying. Oh, that's so funny. I love that we can just sit down and do this. And, that's one of the main reasons I started this podcast was to
Mm-hmm.
share stories of incredible humans, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're not like these.
Mm.
And that if you have the power to realize your potential and start to go on this journey, other people can see themselves in you. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the beauty of what you mentioned earlier of being being able to empathize with people and being empathic. So
Mm-hmm.
to kind of wrap up the interview, can you talk about, you mentioned a few books, but is there
Mm.
a resource that has really been pivotal on this journey for you? It can be a book, a podcast, or even your coach. Yeah. Do you think it was your coach?
I say what started the journey for me, of course, my coaches, like I will forever be rooting for them, and I definitely know that they were huge catalysts to my growth.
Mm-hmm.
But one book that really changed a lot of things for me is called The Confidence Code,
Yeah.
and it's by Claire Shipman and Patty Kay. And so they basically go through a whole bunch of social and scientific studies that explain the confidence gap between men and women.
Yeah.
Why, when a woman is applying for a job, she won't apply for a position unless she feels she has 100% of the qualifications. But men will usually apply for a job if they feel they've got like about 60% of the qualifications, and they usually end up getting it. And so just that book was just such an eye opener to like, wow, the biggest thing holding us back is our own selves. The biggest thing holding me back is my own self. Like, there's no there isn't like a biological determinism that makes us hardwired to be less confident than men. That stuff, even if there is, those are just genetic alterations based on the way that our ancestors have been. So we literally are the doorway between the way we've operated in the past and the way we want the world to look.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I just woke up to like, okay, woman, like you just like pick yourself up. Like, stop waiting for somebody to give you the permission. You
Yeah.
want to feel more confident? Go start being more confident, because confidence is a practice. It's not a personality trait.
I
That's
love
when I
that.
realized like, oh, okay, I'm not just one of those unconfident people. I have chosen to not be confident because I haven't done enough things to push myself out of my comfort zone.
Right.
And so, anyways, that's a long answer to your
It's a muscle.
question of a book, but about a book. But that's definitely one that I recommend for everybody to open my eyes as a mom of two girls. It opened my eyes as a person, opened my eyes as an entrepreneur, as a wife, as just a human being, to just wake up to my own power.
The last final question is, and you've touched on this a lot, and that's when I know that people are so freaking in tune with it, right? In tune with their why, is that it's literally like threaded in all of their responses. But it's, what's your why? What do you strongly believe that you were meant to do during your time here, Dhouha?
I honestly feel like I was born to be a catalyst for change, but in the sense of empowering those that are in key positions for change. I know that, like, it's kind of like the pay it forward movement. I literally feel like, okay, when I'm working with like one Black woman in politics, she's going to go and impact so many lives after that. And I know that I had a role to play in that because I helped her get to her best, and I helped her believe in herself, and I helped her grow the confidence and the guts that she needed to compete in a male white dominant political sphere.
Yeah.
For example, if I'm coaching an Aboriginal woman who's starting her own business with everything she's got in society placed working against her, like, we can't just sit around and wait for society to create the perfect space for us. The space is created by those trailblazers that forge ahead, and demand that space and occupy that space. And
Yeah.
so I'm literally, I literally see myself as the catalyst to those people stepping up to those levels, because it is not meant for any one person or one woman or one race or one ethnicity or one human to do it alone. We
Yeah.
all need to support each other.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for
Thank you,
your
Naomi. You're
presence.
amazing.
You're amazing. And I hope that everyone who, took the time to listen really is able to take, at least one thing from this conversation, and not just take it and sit down and mull over it, although that's important, but actually figure out ways that you could use it in your own life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let it settle, and figure out how you can take it and make it yours and apply it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
for, yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Naomi. I just want
No,
to
you were
thank
gonna say
you. Like,
something.
you're amazing. And like, for anybody listening to this, like, let's literally keep this conversation going. Like, I'm literally just inviting any person that listens to this to
Yeah.
just reach out to me, and let's literally talk about this,
Yes.
because
And
that
we're
is usually the first step. Like, let's not hide in our corners and
Mhm.
mull over the change that we want to make in the world. Let's verbalize it. Let's put it out there.
Yeah.
And I'm so inspired to hear what every person has gotten out of this, and what thoughts and what actions this leads to. So thank you so much, Naomi, for bringing
Absolutely.
your gifts to the world, for creating this platform, and for having me. I'm humbled to be here. I love you.
My absolute pleasure, and I love you too, Dhouha. So yes, let's take this conversation forward. Where's the best place for people to connect with you? And if people are interested to learn more about your story, how can they get in touch?
Instagram, plain and simple.
Instagram.
My handle is at Dhouha.withinsight. Dhouha is DHOUHA .withinsight all together.
And all the links will be shared wherever this is shared. So yes, you can find it in the show notes.
Awesome. Or stalk Naomi. She usually knows where to find me.
Okay, so yeah, you heard it from Dhouha herself. Keep the conversation going. Reach out to her if you have any other questions, and have a great night. Hey there, it's Naomi again. How did you find the episode? I'm very curious because these are all women that have impacted me in a very specific way, and to share their stories is the ultimate privilege. So make sure to subscribe to the Power of Why podcast if you haven't already, and leave a review down below. Can't wait to hear your thoughts.